Welcome to the Piston Fanatic. I am your host, Dave Dalton, and I'm excited to share my passion and perspective of our Detroit Pistons as we go on this fantastic voyage together. I've been a diehard Piston fan since the days of Dave Bing and Bob Lanier. Piston fans, the schedule is out, and it's exciting, and it's over 2 months away, but it's still exciting to see the schedule. And well, you play a certain number of games against each team. It's predetermined, but when you play them does make a difference and can certainly impact your season. For example, how many back-to-backs? Last year we had at least 14 back-to-backs. I think we had as many or more than most teams. And most of those back-to-backs was in the first part of the season. So for a young team that was just trying to figure themselves out, that was very challenging. And you could almost predict that we weren't going to be very successful. So we're going to look at this year's schedule, and I'm optimistic. Again, the NBA is so tough. It's so balanced. There's no easy wins in the league, and fewer than there's ever been. And obviously injuries play a big impact when you can play a team. Obviously, if you're playing back-to-back, and especially if the second game of a back-to-back's on the road against a good team, your chances aren't very good at winning that game. It can happen. But anyway, we open up Wednesday, October 25th at Miami. Then we play at Charlotte. And then we get to play our home opener is Saturday, October 28th against the Chicago Bulls. So it's a winnable game. The Bulls have talent, so they're one of these teams that's like stuck in the middle that I always talk about. They have, lots of talent. They have Zach LaVine and DeMar DeRozan and Vucevic. Those are three, big-time scorers. They have some other really good players. But it's a winnable game, especially at home, and we have talent. So, again, another challenge is we have a new coaching staff, which I'm so pumped for our coaching staff. And I think that, Monty's going to be great. I think that Dan Burke's going to be great, our defensive coordinator. It's going to be interesting to see how he can apply his system and his teaching to individual players. But here's the thing. The start of the season is going to be real important to our team. And we start out the season with 12 of our first 22 games are at home. Good sign. Real positive. I think that 11 of those 22 games are winnable, which is hard to define what is winnable, again, in the NBA. And last year we beat some of the better teams and we lost to some weaker teams, and that certainly can happen. But to have 12 of our first 22 home with this young team and new coaching staff, and to have, so we're playing at the beginning of the season, we play our second game's at Charlotte, certainly a winnable game. Chicago's possibly a winnable game. Oklahoma City's loaded with talent, but there are a lot of young players, and so that's at Oklahoma City, so that will be a challenge. Portland is going to be at home and on November 1st, and that's, we're going to have to see if Dame gets traded. So it's likely that Damian Lillard will be traded, and so that should be a winnable game. Then the Pelicans we play, and that's going to be a tired one to win, but that's in New Orleans, and so Phoenix playing at home, they got that stacked team. They have Durant and Booker and Beal, and so they're going to be hard to beat. But, and then we have Golden State at home, and we beat them last year on the road, actually. So then we got Milwaukee, which is a real tough game, and Philadelphia, which is a tough game. So those are our first 10 games. But then we have at Chicago, again, I think a winnable game. And the key for us this year is going to be able to beat teams like Chicago and Atlanta and the Knicks. So if we want to have any hope of making the playoffs, we have to beat the Oklahoma Cities and the Bulls and the Hornets. And, we have to beat some of these teams that have, finished, all of these teams finished with a better record than us last year. But Cade Cunningham, there's tape. I haven't seen the tape yet. I can't wait to see it. But there's lots of talk about the Rico Hines. Rico Hines is like pickup basketball, but it's very organized. And this guy named Rico Hines has these players that come, NBA players, a lot of the best players come and play in these pickup games. Like they're somewhat organized, but they're always get a lot of really quality players at them. And so by some accounts, Cade Cunningham has been the best player. And other people say, that he's just been tremendous. So that is still certainly going to be a key to our team. I think that Cade, if he has the year that he can have, plus his leadership and the culture he creates, I think that is going to really set the tone for us. And with the other talent that we have, I think there's some real positive signs. So anyway, those first 22 games, like I said, after the first 10, we get to play Chicago. We play Atlanta at home. Cleveland's another team we got to beat. They're good. They're really good, and they, I think, improved a little bit during the season. But I certainly think we can beat them if our whole squad's healthy and clicking. Toronto's another one of those teams stuck in the middle, and that it's going to be important that we win games against Toronto. They have they barely made the play-in last year. So that's what has to happen. I mean, Piston fans want to make the play-in. Do I think we're going to probably do it? No, but I think there is a chance. There's a chance if everything falls into place and people are healthy and people play the way I think they can, we have a real chance. But there's 15 teams in the Eastern Conference, so 11 teams make the play-in. So that means there's 5 teams are there's 11. There's only 4 teams that don't get to at least make the play-in. So we'll see what happens. So there's those teams that we're gonna have to leapfrog some teams. So I think we can be better certainly than Charlotte and the Wizards. I'm hoping for, and then we're gonna have to jump some other teams like Atlanta and Chicago and Toronto and Cleveland and Indiana. So those are teams that we're gonna have to beat. So anyway, like I said, after the 10 games we play, we got Toronto, it's a winnable game. We play Dallas at home, not likely to win that game. But then we have at Indiana, we have to win that. We have Washington at home. Who knows what's going to happen? We play the Lakers, and so it's really tricky who's going to play for the Lakers. Is LeBron going to be healthy? Are they going to be resting him? Is Anthony Davis going to be healthy? They got a new team that they're putting together. Then we play the Knicks, Cleveland, Indiana, and Philadelphia to end that 22-game stretch at the beginning where again we play 12 of those 22 at home. We can kind of get our footing. We have 11 of those games are somewhat winnable games. So then the schedule goes on, and it gets harder for the most part. Then we have quite a few road games, but then on January 1st, we go out west. And so that's where we play Houston, which is a winnable game, but they're talented. That's going to be a huge game. That game at Houston, January 1st, and the Twins are going to play against each other. And again, we got that little rivalry. Jalen Green said some garbage about Detroit and stuff, and they're really talented. But they do have they picked up some veteran players. Fred VanVleet is an elite point guard. They gave him the max contract, so I think he's big factor that he's played on a championship team before. Then we got to play Utah, and that's hard for everybody. Everybody struggles at Utah. We won at Utah last year, but ironically, for a team that only won 17 games, we won at Utah. So then we play at Golden State, which their home record is tremendous, and Denver, as good as they were last year, their record at home is just phenomenal. So that's going to be hard. Then we finish out that trip playing at then we come home and we play Sacramento. So then we have some games that are winnable again. Then we play at home. We have San Antonio at home and Houston at home and at Washington. Those are winnable games. The challenge is going to be when we have a stretch when we play out west is really going to be tough when we play. Do our West Coast trip, but that's not till February 7th. So I know I'm rambling a little bit, but I just got this schedule, and I just printed it out, and I went through it, pretty much, and I looked to see what things are. But we go out west, and February 7th. So we play at Sacramento, at Portland, which again could be winnable. We play the Lakers and the Clippers, and we play Phoenix. Again, they're loaded. And then we have another game at Indiana, which is weird at the end of the West Coast trip. Usually at the end of the West Coast trip, they let teams play their next game at home. So that's a challenge. A lot of times when teams, it's funny, human nature plays a big role in all of this. Like I said, physically playing back-to-back games plays a big role. But there's sometimes, like if you're coming off a road trip, a long road trip, if it's been hard, human nature I've seen in my lifetime lots of times where the team that's had the road trip, the last game of that road trip, they don't play well. Their minds are kind of like about getting home and whatever. So here's the stretch. So if we can tread water and if we can hang in there, that's 53 games. by the time we get back from that West Coast trip. So then 12 of our next 16 games are at home, and many of those games are winnable. So that between February 24th and March 24th for that month, we have, again, 12 out of 16 games are home, and many of them are winnable. We play Orlando, the Knicks, the Bulls, Cavaliers, the Magic. That's a winnable game. Brooklyn, that's a winnable game. We play the Mavericks. Who knows if Kyrie or Luka are going to be healthy, and we still can beat them even if they have those guys. Charlotte, again, that's one game we have to win. Toronto. So anyway, we have that big stretch up until February 24th. Then we finish out the season. 9 of our last 11 games are on the road. So if we were in the playoff hunt, that would be challenging. But I still think that some of those games are very winnable games, which they include the Knicks, the Timberwolves, and I think the Timberwolves have a chance to be pretty good. So they struggled last year, but they had quite a few injuries, and they just signed Rudy Gobert and so traded for him, and so they had their pieces never really got to a chance to work together, and then Karl Anthony Towns got injured. So anyway, that's just they could be a tough team. But then we have the Knicks, and we have the Wizards, Memphis, and they're tough. So that's a home game, but that's a really tough one. We play at Atlanta. Again, I think we can beat the Hawks. Are they better than us? Maybe, probably, but we can beat them. Then we play at Memphis, Brooklyn, at Brooklyn, winnable game. At Philadelphia, tough game. Chicago at home, at Dallas, and close out the season at San Antonio. So those, it's tough to have 9 of your last games on the road if you're trying to fight for a play-in spot. Another thing I know Piston fans don't want to hear this. I'm sticking to my prediction that we're going to win 15 more games than we did last year, which would put us at 32. I think we could win more than that, and we certainly could win less than that if we have injuries and things don't go right. But I still think that if we can get off to a good start and we can survive that West Coast trip, I think that stretch, that month of February 24th to March 24th, I think that we can really do some damage. Our pieces should be really falling together by then, and I think that we'll have a good chance. I'm going to talk a little bit about the in-season tournament, and there are a lot of talk about the in-season tournament on different podcasts and things, but I'll just give you my input. I think it's a cool thing. I think it's not a big deal. It's not the end of the world, but I think that there's going to be hype over it. I think people are going to know when it's on ESPN, when they cover the game and they talk about the games, they're going to say, and this is a in-season tournament game. So it's going to be noted before the game and after the game. Players are going to hear that. Players are going to hear it on TV. They're going to think about it. I think that it could cause teams to try a little bit harder in those games, which is, again, it shouldn't. All these games count to your schedule. All these games count to where you're going to be seated or whether you're going to make the playoffs or not make the playoffs. So every game is important. But I think this is going to add some spice because you're human. These players are human. They're going to hear, this is a tournament game for the in-season tournament. And I think that it could even cause more upsets because we see that when teams know it's a tournament game and, they're playing not to lose instead of playing to win, they lose those games sometimes. So our playing games, our in-season tournament games start November 10th, home against Philadelphia, and who knows what's going on there. Harden says the general manager is a liar. He's not going to play for him ever, but he doesn't. If he doesn't play for them, he doesn't get paid, and if he doesn't play next season for them, his contract gets turned over to the next season. You can't just say, I'm just going to sit out and not get paid this year. So the way the collective bargaining agreement works, if Harden doesn't play this upcoming season, he's not going to get paid, and he is obligated contractually for Philadelphia the next year, even though he has only 1 year left on his contract. So they obviously have some problems, and if they're not sorted out by November 10th, if Harden's not traded and he's pouting and not trying or whatever, who knows? Then we got to turn around and play Cleveland. Again, Cleveland's a tough team. And if they have all their pieces together, they have Mitchell, and they have Evan Mobley. They have just a really good team. And they improved they had a real weakness in their small forward position, but they kind of addressed that. And so they might be better, but still it's, and it's going to be at Cleveland. So that's going to be challenging. We play, at Atlanta at home, and on the 14th, that's winnable. And we gave Ice Trey some problems last year. He had a hard time scoring against us in some games. And so anyway, we have so our in-season games are Philadelphia, Atlanta, Cleveland, and Indiana. So, and Indiana's November 24th. So Indiana's very beatable. They have Therese Halliburton, I love him. He's a great player, and they have a good team. But I think that we certainly could match them and play really well against them. So, Piston fans, I hope you're excited as I am. Like I said, it's a couple months, but we get to see the schedule. I think that there's a lot of positives about the schedule. Again, especially getting off to a good start. I think that there's the potential is there. I mean, arguably, all these teams are better than us, and so we won't be favored in many of these games. But I do think we have a shot, and if we can pull off a couple of upsets, if we can get fired up to play at Golden State in the beginning. The other thing is you still have to look. One disappointing thing is we only have, like I said, we only have 11 back-to-backs, which is, I think, a good number. It's a small number. I don't know where it ranks. All that stuff is going to come out. But fortunately, we play our second and third game. We play the 27th of October at Charlotte, and then we have to have a back-to-back against the Bulls on the 28th, the next day. But that's at home, so that's a little bit better. But then we turn around. November 1st, we play Portland, which is a winnable game, and then we have to fly out right after that game and play a back-to-back at New Orleans. And if Zion's healthy and Ingram's healthy, they're going to be tough for anybody to beat. And then we have to play Sunday, November 5th, we play the Suns home, and then the next night, Monday, the November 6th, we play the Warriors at home. So that's going to be really challenging. But what I was saying is, so out of 11 games, out of our first 8 games, we have 3 back-to-backs in our first 8 games. So I don't know. I know that it's hard to make the schedule for the NBA. It's not, there's so many different factors that have to get plugged in, what the arenas are being used for this night and that night, and to make it come through is just really hard. So, but it's still thrilling, and I'm still excited. And I talked a little bit about our young core, and I'm going to talk about it again in an upcoming episode because I didn't really quite clarify everything. But I hope that you're half as excited as I am. I think that it's going to be a fun year. We have all this talent and all this young players, which, again, it takes time for these young players to develop. But we have some guys that are just going to be so much fun to watch. We have smart players. We have guys that are hard workers. We got guys that I think fit together. And I think that, if guys can shoot the ball, if our perimeter shooting is halfway decent, and I do really expect our defense to take an enormous jump forward. And so I'm optimistic. So I'm always optimistic, and I know that some people aren't going to think that, but I think that we have a good chance to get off to a good, decent start, and we'll see what happens. So anyway, I hope that you, try to do something nice today. Be the reason that someone feels welcome, seen, heard, valued, loved, and supported. And go Pistons.